And our Evan Koslof is covering all the races for us. He joins us now from the Atlanta suburb of Jackson, Georgia. Evan, Georgia is certainly a battleground state. It's been for a long time, and there are a bunch of races to watch there. Which ones are you focusing on?
Yeah, Josh, it's going to be a really busy day here in Georgia, and we've been talking to people throughout the area about their thoughts on all this. First off, the big race, one of them getting a lot of attention, is that Senate primary, where we have a number of Republicans trying to win the opportunity to face off against the Democrat, Jon Ossoff, the current senator in November. That includes two members of Congress who have really closely aligned themselves with President Donald Trump, and then also a former college football coach that was endorsed by the Republican governor. So that's the Senate primary. There's also two big primaries for the governor's race, both on the Democratic side and on the Republican side. A number of candidates. It's very crowded, and also a lot of money has been spent. Listen to this. Just in the GOP primary, they've spent over $100 million on advertisements. So Georgians I've been talking to have seen a lot of these commercials, and many of them have really taken a nasty tone. There have been a lot of attack ads here in that race. Let's hear from some of the voters, though. We spent the day, we started in Atlanta, which is, of course, a very blue area, Fulton County is, and then moved down here to Butts County. We're in Jackson, Georgia. That's it's Trump country, essentially, heavily went for him. So take a listen. The first two people you're going to hear are from Atlanta. The second two are from here in Jackson. Take a listen.
Affordability, like the world is like crumbling around us. It seems like everybody is struggling.
MAGA Republicans trying to take away the Voting Rights Act. I mean, just take away someone's right to vote.
I don't trust the Democrats, so anything I can do to keep the Republicans in office.
Gas is a huge issue for everybody. If Trump could work on that, that would be fantastic.
All right, so we could be looking at some big turnout. The Secretary of State office told us that right in early voting so far, it topped over 1 million people in Georgia. Josh, that's a record.
National reporter Evan Koslof joins us now from Jackson, Georgia, southeast of Atlanta. Evan, what are you seeing there?
Well, Sharon, the polls have been really active here in steamy hot Jackson, Georgia. In fact, I was just in there, and there was just an influx of people as they get off of work. There was a line down the hall and around the corner as they are finally going to be able to decide on some of these big races after months of campaign ads. They're going to be able to vote on big races for U.S. Senate, for governor, and beyond. We started in downtown Atlanta, the state's most populous city, where voters had a lot of reasons for coming out.
Affordability, like the world is like crumbling around us. It seems like everybody is struggling.
MAGA Republicans trying to take away the Voting Rights Act.
Fiscal responsibility and safe streets.
The city of 500,000 is solidly blue and will no doubt play a critical role in Democratic primaries, including for governor, where former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms is facing a crowded field, including former Land Commissioner Mike Thurmond and the former Republican Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. We then left the city, heading about an hour south for Butts County, a deep red area that voted for President Trump overwhelmingly in 2024.
I don't trust the Democrats, so anything I can do to keep the Republicans in office.
Gas is a huge issue for everybody. If Trump could work on that, that would be fantastic.
And Georgia Republicans have some big decisions to make. In the Senate primary, two congressmen closely aligned with the president, Mike Collins and Buddy Carter, are facing off against a former college football coach, Derek Dooley, backed by the Republican governor. The winner of that primary will take on Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff in November. Well, listen to this. Over $100 million was spent on that race alone. Now, we don't quite know whether that's translating into turnout overall, but listen to this. The Secretary of State office for Georgia said that early voting topped 1 million, a record for a Georgia primary.
Wow, it's going to be an exciting night. All right, Evan Koslof, we'll see you a little later. Walk us through those races.
Right, Sharon, it's very possible we leave tonight without a victor. That's because you need to get over a majority in Georgia or else there's a runoff. So that's possible. But let's talk about some of those big races, starting with the race for Senate. Now, Jon Ossoff is the Democrat and the incumbent, so he doesn't have anybody going against him. But there are a trio of Republicans that are hoping to unseat him in November. Let's run through them. First, there's Mike Collins. I'm at the watch party where his supporters are here hoping that this turns into a victory party. He's one of the candidates candidates. There's also another member of Congress, Buddy Carter. I should note both of them have really tried to align themselves with President Donald Trump. And then on top of that, we have Derek Dooley. Football fans out there might know him. He was a former coach of the University of Tennessee, and he actually has the endorsement of the Republican governor here. So that's the Senate race. There's another big one. Let's talk about the race for governor, where right now we have a very crowded field on the Republican side and on the Democrat side. Let's start by focusing in on the GOP, where we have the top three leaders in the state below the governor all running. So we have the Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, and he actually has the support of President Trump. There's also the Attorney General, that's Chris Carr, and then the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. And then there's a fourth person that's actually running who entered a little later, and that was Rick Jackson, a billionaire businessman here in Georgia. So very crowded and very expensive. Also, over $100 million were spent on that Republican primary. And then to talk about the Democrats there is a front runner. Right now it's the former mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, but she's actually going against Mike Thurmond, the former Georgia Labor Commissioner, and then Jeff Duncan, the former Lieutenant Governor here in Georgia and a former Republican. So a lot going on in Georgia, Sharon, like there always is here when it comes to an election. I lost you for just a second, but I got you now. So let's talk about our friends right over the border in Alabama, where we have a couple big races, starting with the race for governor. There are a bunch of candidates running, too many to name here, but I will note that the senator there in Alabama, Tommy Tuberville, is one of the people that have entered the race, a Republican there. Also notable, we've got Doug Jones, you may remember that name, a former senator serving from 2018 to 2021. And of course, with Tuberville throwing his hat in the ring for governor, that means he's leaving the Senate. And so we have a bunch of people entering the Senate race there. President Trump has supported Barry Moore, a member of Congress. Also, the Attorney General of Alabama, that's Steve Marshall, is running. So we have a lot of candidates in Alabama as well. It's going to be a long night and a pretty interesting night as well, Sharon.
All right, Evan. Evan, you've moved inside. Where are you, and what are you following tonight?
So we're here in Jackson, Georgia, and this is the watch party for Mike Collins, who is running for that Senate seat. He's one of three Republicans. I'll tell you, there's some optimism in the room. They just put the music up. Some people are drinking beers. Nobody's doing keg stands just yet, though, because it's still early in the night. So let's remind everybody about what this race is. There are three people running in the Republican Party to try to get the opportunity to face off against the Democrat, Senator Jon Ossoff, in November. So, of course, this is Collins, a one-term member of Congress so far. And then also there's Buddy Carter, a number member of Congress. He's referred to himself as a MAGA warrior. He's also tried to align himself strongly with President Donald Trump. And then the third is Derek Dooley, who's a former college football coach from the University of Tennessee. Also, importantly, has that endorsement of the Republican governor here in Georgia. So that's a Senate race. We're also following the big governor's race. Let's break down the candidates. So the top three representatives of the government under the governor all running. So there's the Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who's backed by the president. We have Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State in Georgia. We have Chris Carr, who's the Georgia Attorney General. And then we have Rick Jackson, a billionaire healthcare executive, actually entered the race a little later and spent big tens of millions of dollars in this race. There have been a lot of campaign ads. You could ask anybody from Georgia. Meanwhile, on the Democrat side, Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor of Atlanta, is the front runner. She's running against a few other people, though, including Mike Thurmond, the former labor commissioner here in Georgia, and then Jeff Duncan, the former lieutenant governor, and also, Sharon, this is notable, a former Republican. So a lot to watch, and it's still early here in Georgia. If nobody gets a majority, the top two will go on to a runoff.
All right, Evan, you have been talking to voters. What are they saying?
Yeah, so Georgia, obviously there are a lot of opinions in this state. It's a swing state. So we decided to start our day in Fulton County, and rushing over there, down the hall, around the corner, and also early voting, Sharon, has topped over 1 million. So a lot of excitement and attention here in Georgia.
Evan, there is a development in the GOP primary for governor in Georgia. What can you tell us?
Yeah, major development here in Georgia. We now know that we're heading for a runoff in the Republican primary for governor. There were 4 candidates that were running, and remember, in Georgia, somebody needs to get a majority or else it goes to a runoff. So let's introduce everybody to the 2 candidates and show us how we got here, at least by the numbers. So the 2 candidates moving on now are the lieutenant governor, that's Burt Jones, and notably, he was backed by President Donald Trump. Then the other candidate that is moving forward to this runoff is going to be Rick Jackson. He's a billionaire healthcare executive, and he spent tens of millions of dollars on this race. And I can tell you, these were sort of the front runners for a lot of this race, and they spent a lot of money on these campaign ads, and it really did turn negative. You could ask any Georgian, they'll tell you they've seen these ads coming on TV often, a lot of mudslinging between the two. So that's what we're now looking at here in the Republican primary. It does mean that the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, no longer moving forward, and the Attorney General here in Georgia, Chris Carr, not moving on to the runoff. Let's talk a little bit on the Democratic side for this important governor's race. Right now, it's not been called there one way or the other, but right now there is a lead for the front runner, the former mayor of Atlanta, that's Keisha Lance Bottoms. So we are now getting a clearer picture, Sharon, on the Republican side. We're going to have to wait a little bit longer on the Democrat side.
Okay, Evan, what about the Georgia Senate race? What do we know there?
Well, Sharon, I didn't quite hear you there, but if you're asking about the Senate race,
yes.
I'd love to dive into that because, of course, that's where I am here. We're at the watch party for Mike Collins. That he's one of the 3 Republicans that are vying for the opportunity to try on unseat the Democrat Senator Jon Ossoff here in Georgia. So right now, it's too early to be called here. But let's talk about the other 2 candidates. There's Buddy Carter, another member of Congress who has really aligned himself closely with the president, called himself a MAGA warrior. And then Derek Dooley, who is a former college football coach from the University of Tennessee.
I want to go now to Evan Koslof, who is live in Georgia with us tonight. Evan, let's start with the Senate race in Georgia. Some big news there, right?
Let me know if you need me to check.
Yeah, we do have a big development here where it turned from a watch party to a bit of a victory party because Mike Collins is moving on to the runoff. Remember, in Georgia, you need to get 50% of the vote, or Buddy Carter, another member of Congress, a 6th-term member who actually calls himself a MAGA warrior, and then Derek Dooley, who's aligned with the governor here in Georgia. And all of this, remember, is to try and go and defeat the Democrat, Jon Ossoff. So any minute, Sharon, we might be hearing from Collins. First, let's listen in what he said shortly before as we spoke with him. Congressman, you already have a job on Capitol Hill. Why do you want to go to the other side of the Hill to go join the Senate?
You know, it's amazing, but we've sent so much good legislation over to that Senate, and they just don't pick it up. And it's not because we don't have enough Republicans over there, but it's sometimes we don't always have the right Republicans over there. And I want to make sure that we get the right Republican over there in Georgia.
A year ago, I was reaching out to Mike Collins. I said,
all right, so that was the message there. I'm going to speak a little quieter to be respectful here as everybody listens in, but he's supposed to take the stage any minute now here in Jackson, Georgia.
All right, so Evan, I want to go to the governor race now. There's been a runoff declared in the Republican race, right?
when he called me last summer, I said,
Yeah, same deal. So you need to get a majority to be declared. And so we do have a runoff, 2 candidates for that. Remember, that's Burt Jones, the lieutenant governor, who is endorsed by the president. And then the other one is Rick Jackson. He's the billionaire healthcare executive. So the 2 of them are going to be moving forward for that runoff. And then let's talk about the Democrat. The former Atlanta mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, is leading big right now, but that race has not been called, at least not yet, Sharon. Send it back to you.
All right, Evan, I understand that we're waiting now to hear from Collins, who again just advanced to the GOP there as for Senate of Georgia. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Taylor Popolaris. Our Evan Koslof is live in Georgia. Evan, what can you tell us about this race?
Handful of issues, but really focused on.
Yeah, she was leading for most of the night by a heavy margin, and so we did see this coming, and yet they did call it just shortly ago. And so we're starting to have the battle lines drawn for this crucial governor's race in Georgia. So she's going to be the Democrat, and we could also talk a little bit about the Republican. We don't have a candidate just yet, but we are getting a little closer to that because we're heading to a runoff. Remember, in Georgia, if you need to get a majority, and if you don't get over that 50%, then you head to a runoff. So we're now moving from the 4 candidates that we had to just 2. Who are those Republican candidates? It's Burt Jones, that's the lieutenant governor who was endorsed by President Donald Trump. And then the other candidate is Rick Jackson. Remember, he's the billionaire healthcare executive that entered the race a bit late and then spent tens of millions of dollars on his campaign. This race overall was very expensive, over $100 million spent on the Republican primary. And now, Sharon, it looks like a little more money is going to be spent on this runoff, which is coming up in June.
Yeah, it seems so. All right, Evan, what is the latest in the Senate race in Georgia?
Yeah, so that also is going to be heading to a runoff. So Georgians get ready to keep voting for this big race. So Mike Collins, I'm here at the watch party, which has turned into a bit of a victory party, and now it's started to empty out as the supporters leave for the evening. But he is advancing to the runoff. We don't yet know who he'll be going against, but remember, there are 2 others that were in the race. Derek Dooley, who was endorsed by the governor, and then Buddy Carter, another member of Congress that refers to himself as a MAGA warrior. So we don't yet know who Mike Collins is going to be going against in that Republican primary. We're going to find out hopefully shortly here. Remember, the winner of this Republican primary goes off to face the Democrat Jon Ossoff here in Georgia. Sharon, so it's another busy night here in Georgia, as it always is every election cycle.
It always is. You're exactly right.